Mm-hmm.
And the question needs to be asked, if you are a believer and you follow the Christian faith, and in particular, if you're following Jesus as a disciple, I'm not completely sure how Sonia saying, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, you struggle with the fact that she still died, because there are implications that would suggest that simply because you believe in Jesus, you are now excused from the violence that happens in this world, or you're somehow excused from the suffering that is experienced in this world.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if salvation is only about your individual belief that keeps you long enough to die and go to heaven, then we need to have a longer conversation about what salvation actually meant in the gospel narrative.
Well, good evening, soulmates. We're glad to be back with you. Excited about this show tonight. I am Michael Chill Humphrey, and I'm here with my podcast partner, my wonder twin, Darren DB Bryant. What's up, DB?
What's going on, my brother? It's good to see you.
You as well. You as well, as always. Whole lot going on in the world, man.
Man, a whole lot to talk about. Let's put it that way.
Well, we're excited. We're going to get into it. When you make a request from a guest of yours to send you a resume or a CV so that you can adequately introduce them and give them some background, and they send you a variety of 3 of them, you know you're dealing with a bad man.
Pretty much.
Well, we are excited tonight to have our boy, Dr. Oliver M. Thomas, Ph.D. We're truly excited about it. I've known Oliver for a few years now here in Greensboro, and we've ended up in many of the same social settings, some of the same business settings, a lot of the same business settings as well, and have become friends over the years. I call him my big little brother because he's much younger, but he teaches me something every time I'm around him. So we're glad to have him. Oliver is currently serving in the role as the Director of External Affairs at the illustrious North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. He's a gifted servant leader with 16 years of experience in preparing future leaders, strategic planning, and community building in both the public and ecclesial sectors. He also taught African American history in the Department of History and Political Science at A&T. And in his current role as the Director of External Affairs, his primary responsibility is to develop and enhance relationships with local, regional, state, federal, and elected officials, as well as key stakeholders, alumni, and the community at large. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science from North Carolina A&T State University, a master's degree from the other alma mater that we share, master's degree in divinity from Wake Forest University, and a doctor of philosophy and educational studies with a concentration in cultural foundations from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. He serves on too many boards to name. He's truly one of the pillars around the Greensboro community, but to name a few, serves on the Shirley T. Fry YWCA Board of Directors, the Metro YMCA Board of Directors, which we serve on together, Guilford Works Workforce Development Board, and a host of others. We also were classmates in the class of 23 class of Leadership Greensboro. He has been named 40 under 40 in both Triad Business Journal and the Black Ink magazine, 40 under 40 as well. He is married to the lovely Denasia Pendergrass Thomas of Charlotte, North Carolina, and they have one son, Master Aiden Thomas, who is the heartbeat of their lives. And Oscar, please tell us anything more you want to share about yourself. I forgot to mention that you lived in Charlotte, grew up part of the time in Charlotte by way of Bertie County, North Carolina.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good to be with you this evening, brothers. Thank you, Brother Mike, for that introduction. Yeah, so my home is Windsor, North Carolina, Bertie County. Both my mom and my dad's side of the families are from Bertie, but Charlotte is home as well. We moved there when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And so, one of the things that I will add in terms of that intro is I'm also an ordained Baptist minister. And so that's a key and important part of my life. I have been ordained now since 2011. And so it's one thing to complete a Master of Divinity, which anyone can study. Of course, you have seekers, you have those who feel they're called, and you have those who are wanderers trying to figure it out. But for those of us who are ordained in this ministry as well, we always want to make sure that we include that in the intro because it's how we frame life, to be honest.
Yeah,
Uh,
great, great. Well, let me ask you this, and this is something I'm hoping that Darren and I will start doing moving forward, because as brothers, we just don't do it enough with each other. And that's to ask, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you coming in tonight?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I appreciate that question. Tonight, coming in, I'm joining you all from Lawrence, Kansas, the University of Kansas, KU, for a conference here. And so, having a great time learning and growing. Professional development is always important, and it engages personal development as well. So I'm coming in tonight really with an attitude and a posture of growth, attitude and a posture of learning, and an openness to the day. Um, some days that's by this time of the evening, I am working with my son to decide if he's ready to go to bed, if he's not ready to go to bed.
I know the feeling.
And that too is its own learning and growing experience, which I enjoy. He's 3.5 years old. And so, if you know anything about little people, they are that. They are little people, very expressive, very communicative. And so, but tonight, again, a wonderful night, and coming in with a spirit of learning and growth and openness.
Great, great. What about you, Darren? How are you coming in tonight?
If I have to be honest, I probably came in or started coming in until I had to sort of toss one up to the man above. I was coming in with anger, to be totally honest, which is something we're going to talk about on this episode. I'm kind of angry at what happened to our sister Sonia Massey, which we're going to discuss. I'm angry about the name calling of our vice president, which we're going to discuss. I'm angry about and fed up about how certain things are going with a certain race of people. And I'm probably even more fed up with people who look like me, and that we'll get into. Again, I had to really say a prayer before I got here to start the podcast. I'm going to try to be as professional as I can be, because if I say what's really on my heart, it probably will not be a good thing. And I'll leave it there.
All right, that's honest.
How about yourself, brother?
That's honest. I'm coming in probably a bit more optimistic than I've been in recent weeks. It's been a crazy July.
Yes.
And for folks who who are believers, if I make the statement, there's been a change in the atmosphere, they'll understand what that means. Well, there has been a shift and a change in the atmosphere that I don't think any of us were expecting.
True.
So it's a feeling of some real optimism, some shared kind of disbelief with you, Darren, in some of the things that I'm seeing as regarded this shift in the atmosphere, but more optimistic than I've been in a minute. I've had a bit of a reprieve as my children are traveling, and so to be empty nesting right now for the past few weeks has been a good break,
Yeah.
to say the absolute least. And too often, us as brothers, we don't realize that we need to shut down too sometimes. So that's where I am. That's where I am.
Good
But
stuff.
it's a great segue, and I've got to look at a sheet of paper here just to go through some of what all has really shifted in the course of July.
Mhm.
We go back to June 27th, the very end of June, for the Biden and Trump debate, which I want to get your take on, Doc. And we'll circle back around to it and the fallout from that and the call for Biden to step down. July 6th was the Sonia Macy murder. Let's call it what it is. July 14th was the Donald Trump assassination attempt. And want to hear from both of you your take on that unfortunate event. The 15th of July, Trump names J.D. Vance as his VP running mate, and starting to understand who J.D. Vance is has been another shift. The 21st of July, President Biden steps down and endorses Kamala Harris. Also on the 21st, 90,000 women gathered on Zoom and other streaming services in support of Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. And Darren, you said we were going to talk about the name calling a little bit. Even the mispronunciation of her name
Absolutely.
is an issue. The 22nd, Roland Martin hosted his own Zoom call with 54,000 Black men on it. An interesting tool that was used to galvanize brothers around these issues and discuss these issues, and hope to talk about that a bit. So right off the bat, Oliver, what was your take on the debate and the fallout from that?
Mm-hmm. I watched the debate 3 times. Watched it the night of, and then watched it several times afterward. Several things for me. One, leading up to the debate, I asked questions around why is this being marketed as if this is a boxing match?
Mm.
And if it's being marketed as if this is a boxing match, what are U.S. citizens being sort of prodded and goaded into around debates, around presidential debates? Is this going to be a debate about policy?
Right.
Or is this going to be something else?
Yeah.
President Biden is a senior citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Former President Trump is a senior citizen. And so for me, I was already coming in with a sense of suspicion.
Yeah.
And if you go back and you watch the way, again, it was being marketed and the way people were being driven to watch the debate, I mean, it really was like we were getting ready to watch a boxing match.
Yep.
And not just a boxing match in prime time, but almost a boxing match in the era of pay-per-view. And I know you all been around long enough to know, right? You
Right.
actually going to have to drive people to the pay-per-view in order to watch the boxing match.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, to be honest, I was already getting myself prepared to one. You know, this may be a little bit controversial, but to not watch it on MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, either one of them,
Hmm.
either one of those news outlets, but to watch the debate on PBS NewsHour or to watch the debate on something like C-SPAN.
For a more neutral take on it.
No, not necessarily neutral. Um, I guess you could say somewhat neutral. Mike, I would say this, right? The commentary wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
The pundits wouldn't be there.
Yep. Yep.
PBS NewsHour is going to let the debate stand on its own,
Yep.
and they're going to wait till the debate ends, and then the journalists are going to do what investigative journalists and study journalists do, and not just have a commentary on what was just seen, but literally to dig into, so what was said, what were the facts, what were not the facts.
Right.
And so as I was watching the debate, to be quite honest, I was quite frustrated because I thought it was clear to me, listening and engaging. President Biden came to discuss policy, came to debate policy.
Right.
Um, and that was not the case. It was not a case for debating policy and issues. Former President Trump was not coming to debate issues and policies.
Right.
And so throughout the debate, and even as the moderators were not disrupting. And of course, there were rules set in place for this debate. There
Yep.
were rules set in place by President Biden's team on turning the mics off or not interrupting and all these things alike. But the moderators were not fact checking in real time. The
Nope.
moderators were not challenging some of what was being said. But for a listening ear, attentive, listening, critical ear, you know that the moderators, right? They say the question was,
Right.
right? If you say the question was more than once, it's clear that the question is not being
Yeah.
answered in my mind.
Yep.
Um, and so I really struggled with it, and I struggled within the post debate, and then the commentary. And folks were saying, "Well, President Biden failed." And what did he fail at?
Hmm. Hmm.
What were the issues? Yes, he had some stumbles. I don't take that away. But if you were listening to him, in my opinion, you could hear his level of frustration around what he came to prepare to engage in and what the debate was. So again, I watched the debate multiple times and I said, this is unfortunate. It's sad with where we are as a country because this was set up like a boxing match and people were goaded and prodded in such a way that, again, if you let that energy carry you throughout and then post, you would not have necessarily been able to settle down, listen to the debate again, and take into account what was being said by one person and what was said or not being said by another person.
Got it.
It's interesting, Dr. Oliver. I have a very similar take on it. My thought, and we discussed this just a bit on the last episode. Um, it started out as two old guys at the country club arguing about who could beat who in 18 rounds of golf. That's how this thing started. And I immediately said that, and then one of them, I can't remember, I think it was actually President Biden, said that I could beat you in 18 holes and carry the bag. Neither one of them can carry a bag for 18 holes. Let's just call that what it is. So it started there for me. And then I think the second thing that was really noticeable is, and I think you mentioned this, the moderators would not call President Trump on any of his non-truths or lies. and they had every opportunity to do so. I think the other thing is that cognitively, I don't know that, and this is just my opinion, if President Biden could actually call Donald Trump on his lies. I think he wanted to, but he could never get around to doing it. So really, we were left to the pundits to try to fact check everything once the debate was over. Where I would, like you said, I would have preferred things to be fact checked in real time. So all in all, it was kind of a disappointment, and I think the American public got cheated in terms of understanding what policy was for both of them. Realistically, my take.
But I got to ask this of both of you, knowing who Trump is and the history at debates, have we ever heard him discuss policy in those
No.
settings?
And that is the challenge, right? That is the challenge. What do we now expect out of presidential debates?
Yeah, yeah. Do you still think they're effective?
I don't know. And the only reason I say I don't know is because when I think about the everyday people that I engage with, and I
Yeah,
think about, researchers and faculty that I engage with as well, when I think about students who are, they're not only apathetic, but not just students, there are folks who have experienced hopelessness in terms of being engaged as citizens, everyday civic engagement. I don't know always now that what elected officials, whatever their office may be, I don't know that what they're saying is landing on Main Street.
hmm,
I'm not sure that it's landing with folks when they're struggling in their homes with their families, when they're struggling to pay their bills, when they're struggling to educate their children, when they are experiencing water crises,
hmm.
when you have lead pipes all across the country, when you have persons who are really, they when it comes to science, trusting science. I'm not always certain that people don't trust science anymore.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if again this is their lack of trust in elected officials or a system of government. I'm not sure that they don't trust science as much as they don't trust the people who are speaking to them. And so I don't know if debates still land
Yeah,
because it is a question of are the folks hearing it, listening to it, is it landing in such a way where they feel like it really is speaking to their lived experiences? And that can be, again, whether you're poor and working class or whether you're middle class and you are also well aware that the cost, inflation, uh, a number of factors are affecting your pocketbook
yeah,
and your wallet.
yeah.
But when I'm listening to elected officials, and if what you're saying is not landing with me, then again, as a person who listens to debates and then I talk with folks, I'm not sure that it's landing because again, it's not speaking directly to the issue. So, right, for example, if we talk about or we look at the policies that have been uh, ushered in with the EPA or rules, right,
Yeah.
that are going to be beneficial to U.S. citizens across the country, going to be beneficial to North Carolinians. If we talk about PFAS and the Cape Fear River,
Mhm.
right, people understand that PFAS as a chemical and the forever chemical is what they're saying, what they call it, that then has a correlation with if you're experiencing cancer, if your child experiences cancer.
Yeah.
People understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if an organization, a federal agency is working to make that better, if the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality is working to make that better for North Carolinians, right, in Wilmington, North Carolina, as well as Greensboro, North Carolina, then that makes sense to people. And they
Right.
say, yeah, I understand the science. I can agree to the science. So there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Another way to say there's a disconnect between what we're experiencing, I think, with engagement with elected officials, and we're everyday people, and even sometimes myself, are saying, is this really landing how I need it to land, to know that we're moving forward in positive ways and really positively impacting the community and people on a daily basis?
It's interesting, Dr. Oliver, that you say that, and I agree. I personally think the debate scene is kind of tired, and not effective. Um, if I were a strategist for either side, I would recommend to my candidate that you actually do a series of town halls where you can actually lay out your agenda. You can lay out your policies. Um, and I would not only do a town hall to my base, but I would do a town hall to my competitors' base, or at least those on the fence. Maybe not necessarily to their direct base, but at least those who are undecided or on the fence. Um, and I think the other thing, and you kind of mentioned it, when you talk about on a local level, I would make sure that I have enough surrogates, local, in the various local areas, that they can get my message out. So if it's an EPA issue in the state of North Carolina, I got someone speaking to that. If it's a water issue in Flint, Michigan, I have someone who's speaking to that. Uh, I think that's going to be way more impactful than me debating you and we yelling back and forth, talking about who's right and who's wrong, and then neither one of us really get a point across before it's all said and done. That would be my recommendation. Forget the debates. Let's go out and do town halls. As you know, back in my former product management life, we used to call them road shows, where you take it on the road and you talk to the people in real time and you answer questions in real time from people who that really matter, not from politicians and pundits.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with both of you. It's the issue of relatability from the politicians to the everyday folk. Oliver, as you were talking, I couldn't help but kind of think about church as well, and some of that same breakdown happening there.
Mhm.
And not to switch subjects here, but similarly, for that member of the clergy that's truly preaching from a biblical standpoint, if it's not translating to what folks are dealing with today, or they don't have the ability to translate it to make it understandable for folks and what they are dealing with in this moment, it gets lost.
Mhm.
It really and truly does. And as much as policy is critical, as much as platforms are critical, in many cases, it's not the easiest stuff to follow. And with that, people don't get involved in the political process because so much of it can go over your head.
Mhm.
When you're talking about policy, the issue of Project 2025 has come up. How many of us have read it cover to cover? So it really does take some insight and some strategy for folks to break things down and really make them relatable to the common folks.
Mhm.
Let me ask you, Oliver, coming out of because there was a lot of talk about Biden failed in the debate. Um, he was up against an opponent that I would find it difficult. I think anybody would find it difficult to debate with. You think back to 2016 in one of the debates where he was literally walking behind Hillary Clinton. It's like, what are you doing? Just not following the guidelines and such. But I have to ask about the cognitive state of President Biden, and did the Democratic Party wait too late to pivot? And what's your take on the pivot?
Mhm. I don't know if you can be too late or too early. Politics change so quickly now that if you use the same playbook you've been using for years, some might say that the pivot was too late.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we've seen in the last 2, in the last 5, in the last 8, in the last 10 years, politics is moving a whole lot faster than it has traditionally. And some of that is tied to that politicians as professionals, people who actually are, interested in policy, read policy, review policy. Well, when you have folks who run campaigns and this is not their background, they haven't been fully engaged in policy, and yet they're getting elected to offices, they have figured something out about either what people want or what people think they want, and then they've used it to their benefit to then win an office or a seat.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is that with President Biden's stepping down, I think when we look at the history of the United States and when we look at where we are currently politically, I think it really was probably one of the most selfless acts that a public servant really could offer.
Yep.
He's been at this game for 50 plus years.
Yep.
Uh, And so for him to do that, for him to step down, for him to step aside, for him to also remind all U.S. citizens, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Libertarian, Independent, to remind all of us that democracy is about the collective. Democracy is not about the individual. One person cannot carry democracy. It really does take all of us. And if that is the case, then when we make decisions, right? Um, you think about the number of folks. We talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the number of people that actually were assassinated in the 1960s.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X. Uh, and those are just the ones that people often know and remember.
Yep.
We don't talk about the others often who were assassinated: men, women, elected officials, non-elected officials, parents of persons who were out front and engaging in this way.
Right.
For us to be at a time in U.S. politics and in U.S. society where violence is the answer, whether that violence comes through an attempted assassination or whether violence comes through January 6th, that is not, these are not ways in which we want to engage in democracy from my perspective.
Right.
And that's not just problematic. That is traumatizing and that stays with you, right? And that's not to include, we talk more specifically, right? We talk about the number of school shootings.
Yeah.
We talk about the number of elementary school children that have now died at the hands of gun violence.
Right.
We talk about those who have been killed in their homes,
Yeah.
like Sonia Massey.
Yeah.
Violence, right, seems to have a common place in U.S. society and U.S. culture right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is, well beyond just being problematic. If it's not a pandemic, it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
And in order to shift and change, that means we have to shift and change in the ways in which we engage each other in conversation, the ways in which we humanize and dehumanize
Yeah.
one another. To dehumanize somebody is to say that they are not a part of the society, they're not a part of community. So I don't have to respect them. I don't have to think about what their livelihood is. I don't have to function as if they actually need to live. Their lives are disposable if we are functioning within a dehumanized state. But if we're
Yeah.
going to humanize people daily and we're going to say and speak to what are the values of democracy, and this is not just democracy as a form of government, but this is democracy as a philosophical idea.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? How do we live into it and see uh, the energy and the appreciation? President Biden steps down, or at least steps aside. He's still going to be the president until he
Yeah.
finishes his term, but he steps aside, and you see the energy that folks have galvanized behind um, uh, the presumptive nominee,
Yeah.
Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris. And what you're seeing is energy across the board. You're
Yeah.
seeing Republicans that are endorsing her.
Yeah.
You're seeing Democrats that are endorsing her. You're seeing black people and white people. You see working class folks endorsing her as well. So there's something about the energy, I think, that says that folks are not only have a sense of hope in
Yeah.
what's possible, not just what's possible for the moment in
Right.
terms of pivot again, whether it was too late or whether it was just right on time, but what's possible for the future, right? That
Yeah.
therein lies where people are saying, I see a different future now. I
Yeah.
see something that I can get behind. I see the possibility of change. I see the possibility of us actually building a level of community and engagement to talk with each other. And
Yeah.
we can disagree on policy,
Right.
right? But we can come together around what are the issues that are going to drive us forward.
Hey guys, this is DB with the Sullivan Man Podcast. Hey, we really appreciate you guys rocking with us all these months. The feedback has been amazing. We hope to continue to bring you amazing content. We need a huge favor from you though. We need you to like. I think that like button is somewhere right here. We need you to share. I think it's right here maybe. And we need you to subscribe. Come on guys, keep rocking with us and share this content. And we want to reach millions. We appreciate you.
And, we all know, we've all been around long enough. If you have somebody who just philosophically and ideologically you cannot cross a bridge with, at some level, you still have to say, they live in this world too, and they live in this society as well. And
Yeah.
while we may not be able to cross that bridge, that does not mean they are disposable.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So you've said a lot, Dr. Oliver, all of which makes total sense. Not to be a contrarian on purpose, but I have to. What do you say to the, I don't know, however many million of the MAGA supporters who think the exact opposite of what you just said in terms of democracy? We hear them talk about civil war. They don't care what your policies are. As if their candidate doesn't win, they're talking civil war, and civil war is code for race war. Whether we want to believe that or not, that's code for race war. They should just come out and say it. What's interesting, and I don't want to run down too deep down this rabbit hole, but race war today is different than race war in the 60s because people of color are heavily armed today. And if this thing does happen to jump off, let's say, my question to a lot of them is, are you willing for your wife, children, parents to die, just like you're talking about other people? So again, I agree with you 1,000% in terms of democracy. We can have philosophical differences in terms of our beliefs and policy and the various policies. And we should say, all right, you know what? I respect his or her belief. We have to reside in this country together. But those are people like us. Again, millions of people don't think like us.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Hmm. I don't disagree, and I don't live in a utopia, and I don't think that we'll have a utopia. But to that end, that is where, when it comes to the actual voting booth, that
Yeah.
is where we do have to decide that who we put in office, what they say, what they incite, what they bring out in others really does make a difference. And if that level of violence, and not if, when persons are engaging in that level of violence, both in their thinking and in their speech and in their actions, you need to know, we all need to know, you have to have a different level of response and engagement. That can happen at the ballot box. For those of us who've lived long enough, that is right. That has to happen in your home. The 60s, the 70s, people don't remember or read often about, deacons of defense, right? These were church men Black North Carolinians who said, I'm going to defend my home and I'm going to defend my community.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The Nation of Islam, the Fruit of Islam, Malcolm X. This was not just about violence for violence sake.
Mm-hmm.
This was also about how do we maintain, protect our families, our communities. Um, you cannot just come into my home and decide that because you disagree with me or you think that you should be more powerful than me, then I'm just supposed to acquiesce.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
That's not. That's not. That doesn't work. How really? I mean, really. I know how you think. To your point, again, I'll come back to therein lies the dehumanization. Uh, but in being honest, being real, being understanding around that there are people who want to see me, and as the young people say, unalive. I don't know how young people got to that unalive,
Right.
but there are people in this world who don't want to see me live. That's a
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
reality that we live with. It's one that we have to face daily. Even in, I mean, when we talk about, if we do talk about the church, we talk about pastors and others, prophets. Uh, it's all throughout the text. For those who do read the Bible, the New Testament or the Hebrew Bible, it's all throughout the text that people have been killed, right? People have been assassinated.
Yep.
The question was asked and has been asked, was Dr. King assassinated for the civil rights because of civil rights of black people? Or was Dr. King assassinated because of his poor people campaign movement? He started to mess with the economy, started to mess with the money. So
Mm-hmm.
what was it that got Dr. King killed? Right? Jesus is lynched. James Cone's The Cross and the Lynching Tree. Jesus of Nazareth is lynched because in the first century in Palestine, right? First century Palestine, he was a Palestinian Jew.
Mm-hmm.
He is having to engage oppressive powers,
Mm-hmm.
and he has a counter narrative to those oppressive powers. He speaks to the issue of the economy. He speaks to the issue of people being dehumanized. But the way in which you understand what's happening in the text, in the Gospels, may not be the same. We don't necessarily read Jesus the same way. We don't necessarily read King the same way. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm baffled, as both of you all have addressed violence uh, as a result of things historically, and it's been violence has been proposed um, as a means of dealing with some things even today. We had our former president um, going back to the insurrection to literally incite that violence on that day. Um, got the crowd riled, um, folks angry, not accepting the results of the campaign itself, the election results, not accepting that, and literally moving to overthrow the government in a form, in a way that we never could have imagined. Knowing that, and even now, still spewing the same rhetoric regarding if things don't go as they should go for us in November, there's gonna be blood in the streets. I mean, that's this year. So I'm baffled as to how there are those folks that look like me who are giving a lot of backlash to Kamala Harris at this point. I don't see it. I don't understand it when This is the alternative. If you plan on voting, this is the alternative. And this is a person, and at least a segment of the Republican Party, the MAGA Republicans, who, can I say, hate you? This is hate. I mean, this is flat out hate. If not her, then it's him. I don't understand how folks are personally, and I know this is as individual as it comes from one person to the next, but I just simply cannot fathom that he is the alternative that you want.
Here are my thoughts behind it, and I want to say two things as it relates to what you just said, Chill, and then I'll be off of it quick. Number one, when you go back to this whole Civil War, aka race war, what are those people who look like us, who happen to be on that side, gonna say? Because I can tell you, you're not going to have a sign saying, "Hey, I'm black, but I'm a Republican," or "I'm black and I'm a Donald Trump supporter." They're not going to see that. They're just going to see a black or brown person versus a non-black or brown person. So that's number one. Number two, I think what is driving a lot of them, if you look at those who are, especially those who spoke at the RNC and those who are running for various offices, who want to be in his cabinet or whatever, and this has gone on, throughout the history of this country. I think it's a money grab. Somebody's getting fed some cash, and you can't tell me differently. Because what other reason would you just philosophically have to side with former President Trump if you're not getting fed some dollars? That's just my take.
I don't understand it. I really don't. From this standpoint, once the violence starts and it escalates, in my opinion, right, there is no such thing as friendly or non-friendly fire. So I really don't understand it. There have been days when I've tried to make sense of it. There have been days when I've tried to have conversations with folks. And apart from it, to your point, Mike, apart from it being quite individual, and well, those policies still benefit my pocket if we think about tax policies, or, well, those policies don't affect me. Well, they may not affect you now,
Right.
personally, but they affect people in your life. And those people are still a part of your life, or I think I would want them to be, you would want them to be. So I honestly cannot make sense of it. And it baffles me. And I do read, I follow some of these pages, again, because it's about awareness, about understanding, what it is that people are saying.
Yeah.
So let me share part of my own lived experience. That's how this gets framed in my mind. My mom was in ninth grade. She desegregated. She was a ninth grader, desegregated all white high school in Bertie County, 1966. I have more than one great grandparent who was white from Bertie County. And so I have written about this a bit in my research around. I am well aware of my family members who were former slave owners. I'm well aware of family members who were formerly enslaved. I'm well aware of my family who were free, never were slaves. And I'm aware of my family that were native Tuscarora from Eastern North Carolina. When I look at human history, at least within the context of Eastern North Carolina, and I watch how people and communities shift and change, when you have an abundance of violence, again, everybody dies. it doesn't get limited to if you're white, it doesn't affect you. It doesn't get limited to if you're black, you're going to be continuously just completely eviscerated, right? It's not limited to that.
Right.
These connections between us exist in such a way that everybody is negatively affected.
Yeah.
So if it does come to the point of war, if it does come to the point of a civil war, if it does come to the point of a race war in this country, all across the South, potentially, because the South still seems to be a pretty hotbed for it.
Yep.
Mhm.
There's not gonna be a let's stop and pause for a minute to see if we've gone too far. It's already gone too far.
Right.
And it's already gone too far for too long.
Yeah.
So I really cannot make sense of it anymore as to other than right, if this is where you are, then I have to know where you are, and I have to know that everything that I participate in has to be about, well, how do I then think with other people about what's best for you, even when you're not thinking about what's best for me.
Mm. Mm.
And that's a hard and a harsh reality.
Yeah.
But because of the way my mom had to navigate, because of the way my dad had to navigate, because of what I know about my family history, the way we've navigated forward. So I carry that with me,
Yeah.
which also for me is a source of hope. It's a source of light. It's a source of saying, even through a number of these experiences in the South and in North Carolina and Eastern North Carolina in particular, my people continue to live forward. My family continued to live forward. And they were active in what was necessary in order for the community to excel. Now, whether that was the NAACP,
Yep.
whether that was the church, whether that was being a teacher, right? My mom was a teacher, educator, 35 years, state of North Carolina. Whether that was being a mechanic, my granddad and my dad owned a auto mechanic shop on King Street in Windsor, North Carolina. My granddaddy was one of the first black auto mechanics teacher in the county. Right, whatever that avenue is, whether that's you brothers doing this podcast regularly, whatever that avenue is, to actually give, to challenge, to support, to counter, to offer a counter narrative in community, whatever that access point is, we have to lean into it.
Yeah. 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 That's good. So we've made the pivot. Kamala has gotten the endorsements that are needed. She's still working to get the full number of delegates, which I guess won't fully come until the DNC, I believe, which is the middle of next month, middle of August. We're right on it. How soon do we need to get a vice presidential candidate named?
So in this instance, I probably might be a little bit old school. They can do it at the convention.
Don't think it's too late?
That doesn't have to happen to come before the convention. Now, again, that's following a little bit, the rules. But when you are engaging with folks who's oftentimes their decision making happens because of what they see on TV,
Yeah.
what they hear on the radio, then you may have to decide sooner rather than later in order to keep people energized, keep folks focused and alike. So based on what I've read, and this is based on the vice presidential candidate possibilities that of course we were hearing, whether it was Governor Whitmore, whether it was Governor Cooper, that was some of them withdrawing their names. Based on what I've read, the working assumption is that she will pick that person by August the 7th. So
Got a
But
week.
yeah, but in many ways, I still do like follow rules. I think rules are important, and so the decision could be made at the convention, but I doubt it. I think to some degree, and the convention is August the 19th through the 22nd, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly. And if you think if a decision actually is made by August the 7th, then you've got from August the 7th all the way up to the convention to now for the DNC to say, um, who are we supporting? Who are the delegates supporting? Who are the super delegates supporting? And alike. To your earlier question around the pivot and the timing, it's less than 100 days now. Some might say that by making a decision by August the 7th, then of course you are more focused and aligned by the time you get to the convention.
Mhm.
And so that could mean that the convention is really focused on policy. The
Yeah.
convention is really focused on what are the issues that this ticket is going to address. Will those continue to be, of course, climate change? Will that continue to be focused on women's health and reproductive rights? Some would say, and some have said, that if you go ahead and say, okay, this is what the ticket could look like, and
Mhm.
when the delegates and super delegates vote, excuse me, the focus can really be on the agenda, and it can really be on what are the policies and how those policies be spoken to. Immigration still
Yeah.
major one, of course. War. We're talking about. Ukraine, you're
Yeah.
talking about Israel, Hamas,
Yeah.
all of these important issues that, of course, these two persons as well as the team will have to be attentive to, and we all will have to be attentive to. I think one of the things that we probably should be more attentive to in terms of the collective, if we talk about again coming back to democracy not being about one person, if you look at President Biden's cabinet, and if you look at former President Trump's cabinet, you look at the people that were in their cabinets, look at the policies that were put forth as those cabinet members engage the relative areas that they were responsible for, and you look at the changes that have happened under President Biden, both short term and long term. Again, I think it can be said that if, for the most part, you have those things lined up by the convention, then you can also begin to discuss who could potentially lead
Yeah.
in those cabinet positions so that the focus is on policy. Mhm.
Yeah. What you grinning at back there, Darren?
So it's pretty funny. This conversation is kind of deja vu. Um, so, Dr. Oliver, I'm of the school of thought that, and I'm much older than you. So, but I'm not old school as it relates to this move. Uh, I'm of the belief that it needs to be sooner rather than later in terms of her VP choice. Reason being, if I were again political strategist, my VP, whoever that is, would probably be fighting some of my battles right now while I am developing my policy. I am going into the DNC as, whether it's Josh Shapiro or whoever it is, are fighting Trump and Jed Clampett Vance. Um, as they're having that fight, I am, as the presidential nominee or presumptive presidential nominee, I am putting my policy together and I'm rolling my policy out at the DNC. And I think getting this person sooner rather than later gives her the time to do that. Because right now, and I think, Mike, you and I talked about this earlier this week,
Yeah.
right now, and don't get me wrong, she's riding this wave, but it's a pep rally. I'm just going to call it what it is. Uh, I hear a lot of, what the other side is doing, and the other person is just weird, and all of that talk that's coming out, which is all great. But right now, it's a pep rally. At some point, the pep rally has to end, and we got to get to the game. And the game is, all right, here are my policies. Here's what I plan on doing about border control. Here's what I plan on doing about women's reproductive rights. Here's what I plan on doing about the economy, which is a big one for all of us. And I think getting that vice president to go out and just, and her surrogates to go out and do the talking and the fighting against the other side for now gives her the ability to do that. I think I told Mike earlier, it's almost like being the CEO of a company. You can say, all right, I'm going to bring in this VP, and this is what this person is going to be responsible for. Let's lay that out. I'm going to bring in this cabinet member, and this is what they're going to be responsible for. It's just like saying, I'm the CEO. I have a COO. I know they run operations. I have a CFO. I know they're responsible for the money. I have a CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. I know their goal is to make sure my brand is right. I'm getting the messaging out, the brand messaging out. And I think she could do that, and the other side won't have a clue because they're still too busy selling the nonsense, so to speak. That's my take on it, and that's why I think she should do it sooner rather than later. I think it would benefit her and everyone who's looking to vote for her, and also those who are potentially on the fence, to at least get that messaging from someplace, and then maybe they'll just come on over to her side, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I hear that. And and listen, I do not disagree. I think one of the interesting things is why I still lean into the conventions is because the delegates are still participating in a portion of that democratic process, part of that decision making. But to your point, right? I think it is spot on. In fact, so I mentioned earlier I don't particularly lean in on MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News, but I still do listen, and
Right.
you got to listen just to know how folks are engaging.
Yeah.
But to your point, even on Fox News, there have been some who have either been guests on the shows or commentators who've said that they think this is short-lived for both Republicans and Democrats, because they're saying the same. If you keep doing this, you're still going to miss the point on policy,
Yep.
which I have found interesting. That on both sides, I've heard it say this right now is going to be short lived if there's not a pivot to actually address policies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smart on her part to, and I got to set this up because we're coming off of a change of chancellors at our alma mater. That's coming up in just a few days, and the incoming chancellor in his first press conference talked about keeping his foot on the pedal, foot on the gas, and basically taking the baton from the previous chancellor or the current chancellor and moving things forward. Smart on her part to do that with what President Biden has set up as his platform going into this campaign and building upon that and moving it forward? Or does she have to come with really new ideas and concepts to win voters over?
That's a good question, Mike. So the number of ways in which it has been said that Vice President Harris hasn't done anything as a vice president with President Biden is another example of folks either not reading, not necessarily being engaged, or literally just taking what is said and just carte blanche running with it.
Yeah.
I do think that for the most part, her policies and her approach will follow similarly with the work that she's done with President Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And every president, right, has to lead in their own way. And so I think it could be different as well. Right now, I don't know how it would be different. And the reason I say that is not because it couldn't be different because of who she is as a leader, but because of where we are in so many of the issues that are having to be challenged or pushed back related to, either lawsuits from
Yeah.
policies or rules being put forth by this administration. That's where I think the hold or the rub will be. What will she be able to necessarily pivot and do that will really focus and align with where she's been for a number of years, given what this administration has actually had to confront, respond to, and then again, in the cases of lawsuits, right, having to now change directions or to go back and say we're going to do something different. Now, whether that is, of course, again, whether that's, for example, student loans, right? You think about the ways in which that has shifted um, from when President Biden came in to now.
Yep.
If you think about, the matters with the border, right? If, right, these number of issues, it's yet to be seen or yet to be determined, I think, because this administration has had to respond to so many issues that she, as the president, even we know she'll still be responding to many of these pieces because they'll still be inactive for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Not knowing, not having a good sense of what she has done in this time in her role as VP, isn't that really on the party for having not gotten that message out, or is it not yet time for them to get that message out?
Well, I think
What she's done to this point.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what to Darren's point earlier, that if you think about it, somewhat similar to a CEO, the CEO chooses a CFO, COO rather, and you want them to go do their work, and you're not asking them to be the person on the stoop. You're not asking them the person to be in the forefront.
Yeah.
And so I think it may be just that simple, that the president is the president. He's the one who's been out and about and on the road.
Yep.
And just you want them to do their work. And maybe it is time, yes, to speak more directly to what she has done as in her role as the vice president and what the differences have been made for her and with her with the vice president.
Yeah. I've got don't know what else Darren has, but I've got one more question for you. And we'll have to get you back because we just scratched the surface with the conversation with you, Doc. So we got to get you back at some point. But I saw recently on the second Roland Martin call for Win with Black Men, I think is the name of the organization. The actor and now politician Hill Harper, who's running for Senate in, I think, Illinois, I believe, or maybe Michigan. And he said he ran into a brother and on the street, and the brother was saying, "Hey man, I like what you're talking about. I like your platform. I'm planning on voting for you, and man, that'll be great in November with you and Kamala." On the ticket. And he said, "Hey, my primary is in 10 days. And said the guy eyes just deer in headlights. He said, "What's that?" He said, "You got to go vote in 10 days for me to even be on this ticket." So I set that up and asked, how important to you is not only the presidential race, but all of the down ballot races as well?
Oh, they all are absolutely important. More specifically, especially when we think about people of color and the ways in which we have to engage the criminal justice system, judges,
Yeah.
key part of this electoral process that unfortunately too many people do not know just how important it is to pay attention to the judges being elected, those that you're going to vote for, those that are being appointed.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendously important.
Yeah.
county commissioners, depending on your district, where you are, if you live in the city, don't live in the city, council members, mayors, your side, your district within a city, if your district is having, um, support issues just from the city facilities to come, replacing lights at crosswalks, replacing signals at crosswalks.
Yeah.
If you don't have a relationship with your elected official to really even go to them and say, hey, we put in the petition, or to learn that we need to, some things you actually have to petition your elected official for, city council, and say, we've been requesting that this crosswalk be replaced for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Children cross at this crosswalk every day. If we didn't have parents standing at this crosswalk, if we didn't have some members of the community who are willing to stand in this intersection with a stop sign, we couldn't depend on the actual crosswalk signal for our children to cross the street safely
Right.
or safer.
Right.
Because the other thing is, if the speed limit on that street is 45 or 50 miles an hour, as opposed to 25, that at least slows people down,
Yeah.
right? Those things matter.
Yes.
That's related to your city council, right? So every single office matters, and I think where we do need to lean in, it's every single election cycle, not just the presidential cycle. It is who serves on your board of education.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk about boards of education that have banned books. And if we were to read closely and we would say, well, how in the world did they come to the resolve of banning books?
Mhm.
And how many people showed up such that this group of folks decided that banning books was beneficial? Well, in some instances, those groups of folks that lodged protests or submitted petitions is 4 and 5 people. It was 9 and 10 people who now have persuaded a board of education enough to ban books for an entire school system.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And so, yes, the primaries, making sure that we're registered to vote and before the deadline.
Yes. Yes.
Not showing up to the polling site on the day of, if
Yes.
it's not during early voting, thinking that, we can automatically register to vote and vote in the same day. That's
Right.
not automatic anymore.
Right.
Uh, and so it is also a part of not just us continue to educate ourselves, but again, continue to be present to the conversations and to the questions. Follow your local board of elections, follow your statewide board of elections to know what rules have changed or what policies have changed that affect every single office that you're voting for. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. Well, Darren, we've taken Doc over a bit in time, but uh and again, we've just scratched the surface. So Doc, just prepare yourself. We're gonna have to bring you back at some point. But great conversation. Darren, I don't know if you've got anything else for.
Yeah, I think a couple things as men of color, and I don't. This is not to sort of spark another conversation because I know we have to go. I think there's a couple things that are imperative. Number one, it's imperative that we protect Black women and protect women. Period.
Certainly.
I'm going to say her name, Sonia Massey. Let's not forget that. And I pray to God that justice is served properly in this matter. So that's number one. Number two, get out and vote. Whatever you have to do. You heard Dr. Oliver say it. We have to get out and vote. This is this election is one of the biggest elections of our lifetimes, and it's going to impact our kids and their kids, depending on how this thing goes. Again, we have Supreme Court seats up for possibility. We know what it was like the last time someone was in office. Got three people appointed. There are several Superior Court judges that were appointed. Again, it is critical that we get out and vote. And lastly, and I think you touched on it as well, Dr. Oliver, on the local level, especially for the state of North Carolina, we have a governor's race going on. There's one who looks like us, but to use Kendrick, he's not like us. He is not like us. He just looks like us. Again, get out and vote. Sonya Massey, keep her name in your mouth. Black men, let's protect Black women. We have to do that.
All right.
That's all I have.
I look forward to us to continuing the conversations, brother. And to your point, Darren, about Sonya Massey, the conversation really does need to be had. This sister said to that police officer, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus."
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who are really struggling with the fact that she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," and she still died,
Mm-hmm.
that she was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And the question needs to be asked, if you are a believer and you follow the Christian faith, and in particular, if you're following Jesus as a disciple, I'm not completely sure how Sonya saying, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," you struggle with the fact that she still died, because there are implications that would suggest that simply because you believe in Jesus, you are now excused from the violence that happens in this world, or you're somehow excused from the suffering that is experienced in this world.
Yeah.
It's not.
Mm-hmm.
And if salvation is only about your individual belief that keeps you long enough to die and go to heaven, then we need to have a longer conversation about what salvation actually meant in the gospel narrative as the way Jesus offered it. Because it is about wholeness in community. And wholeness in community means that the suffering, the disenfranchised, the marginalized, it is not just about bringing them to the center of the community. It is, again, to humanize those who have been dehumanized.
Yeah.
And you do that through politics. You do that through economics. You do that through your religious practices. And so some need to ask the question, did my sister, when she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," did that stir up a disturbance in that police officer such because he knew and realized he could not overpower her from that standpoint? He could not control her.
Yeah.
He could not control the situation.
Yeah.
It's just a series of questions that I've been asking, and I've been watching and reading what people say. I didn't want my sister to die, not at all. And she should not have, not in her house, not asking for somebody to come and help her. That's what she was asking for.
Right. Right.
But for people who say they are believers to say they are disturbed or they don't understand how she could say, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," and we have to have a whole deeper level conversation about that in reality. And we do have to protect sisters. We have to protect women. We also, again, have to protect our families,
Yep.
boys and girls,
Yeah.
and really be in tune and attentive to, again, what happens on an everyday basis. It may not happen in my neighborhood, may not happen in my house, but if it's happening anywhere, it's still happening to me.
That's
Mic drop moment.
That's good. That's good. And Doc, we look forward to more conversations with you moving forward. We gotten to hear from you politically. We've gotten to hear from you as a family man, and we've gotten to hear from you as a Christian leader as well. And we've got some more conversations to have with you. Thank you. Do appreciate you.
Thank you, Doc.
Oh, thank you, brother. Absolutely. Thank you for your grace.
You got it. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. This has been a good conversation, and we're going to stay in line with some additional conversation, literally right up and through political conversation in some regards, right up and through the election, because it's just that important. We truly are fighting for our freedom. Thank you. And good night.